Hi everybody, and welcome back to another Small Engines Questions and Answers, where I answer some of the questions that I receive on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So first of all, I want to welcome everybody back, and I want to welcome all my new subscribers. I put out a new video every Friday, so make sure to check in every week and hit the subscribe button. So to get started in today's Q&A, it is springtime, and a question that I often get from people is, I put my stuff away last fall, and now I go to use it, and it won't start. There's good gas in there. I even removed the gas in some cases. I've got fresh gas again in there with a proper mix, and I still can't get going even though I'm pulling and pulling and pulling. Well, what I'm going to show you today is one solution that works about 90% of the time, as long as you don't have anything contaminating the fuel or the carburetor, meaning that you don't have water or dirt in your carb. And what the solution is grab some quick start, some carb cleaner, some gas in a container. And what you want to do is spray some of it in the carburetor of the equipment you're trying to start. Now, if you're trying to start some 2-cycle equipment, make sure that the fuel you're using is mixed. So for example, if you have a leaf blower like this one, take the air filter cover off, remove the air filter, make sure the choke is off. And then all you would do is spray some fuel right in the carburetor hole, right in there. Make sure it's mixed because it's a 2-cycle piece of equipment. And sometimes just getting it started like that with the fuel will get all the juices flowing, as a matter of saying. So basically it's going to help pump up the fuel to the carb, get it all moist with the gas, and it'll get your engine going again. So most of the time that works, and usually people are able to start it for the rest of the season with no problems. And if you've got a lawnmower with a Honda engine like this, just remove the air filter cover again, the air filter. Then you would just spray some quick start or carb cleaner right inside the carburetor throat over here. Just a few sprays like that, and it should go right away. Now, it may not always be the solution to your problem, but most of the time it will work for the first start of the season. And this procedure works excellent for generators as well. Like everybody else, my generator sits for months and sometimes years before I go to use it. And I often have to do that myself, take the air filter cover off the air filter and spray some gas in there to get it going. I actually made a video on this. I've got the link up in the info button at the top right-hand part of the screen. You can click on it to watch it. It's gotten a lot of people out of a jam, especially just before a storm or some kind of hurricane heading their way. So whatever chemical you spray in that's used in a shop, you want to make sure that it's flammable. Certain lubes will not work because they're not flammable. I often get asked if WD-40 will work. I don't think so. I don't think it's quite as flammable as choke and carb cleaner or quick start. So you want to be careful what you use because you could get the spark plug so saturated with something that's not flammable that you can actually make the problem worse for yourself. So one other question that I receive from viewers is, can I convert my steel chainsaw from 0.325 pitch, I'm talking about the chain and bar here, to 3/8? Well, the answer to that is yes. You have to buy a conversion kit from Steel. Basically, it's a new clutch drum, and it'll fit on the crankshaft of your saw. Now, it might come as a sprocket drum or a drum where you put a rim sprocket on. Whichever one you get, it's fine. And this is what I mean by a sprocket drum. The sprocket's built into the clutch drum. And the other one here is just a clutch drum. And what you do is you insert a rim sprocket on this one. I find this version here much better. It's just quicker sometimes to replace the rim sprocket. And it's also better quality as well. And also the advantage with this clutch drum is that you can quickly switch from 0.325 to 3/8. And when I'm talking about 0.325 and 3/8, it's the pitch. It's the space between the drive links. A 0.325 chain, the space will be shorter. On a 3/8, it will be wider. That's why you cannot put a 0.325 chain on a 3/8 sprocket and vice versa. So my suggestion here is if you can get this clutch drum, get it. It might cost a bit more, but it's going to be way more convenient. And a specific question I got just the other day from a YouTuber is, can I do this to my Steel MS291? Well, the answer is yes, and I do recommend that you go see your dealer to buy these parts. You cannot just take the sprocket from any Stihl chainsaw and put it on another. The shaft holes here will vary from chainsaw to chainsaw in a lot of cases. Now, another question that I often get is, when should I replace my chainsaw bar? Well, I do have a video. The link is in the top right-hand corner. You can click on there in the info button to watch it. I will show you, however, a few tips and tricks in today's Q&A as to what to look for. Make sure to watch that other video as well, because I go more in depth as to what to look for. Now, the very first thing I look at is the width of the groove inside the bar. The reason I check that first is because if the groove is too wide, your chain will be loose like this extremely. Now, you might still have a bit of play there even when you do have a brand new bar and chain. Now, one of the main concerns if the groove is too big and the chain is loose in it is that it could come off and hurt you. The other problem you're going to get if the groove is too wide is that you will be almost unable to cut a straight cut. Your chainsaw is going to be cutting crooked. Even if you put a brand new chain in a used bar and the chain is sharp, it's going to cut crooked. Another thing you want to check is all the burring on the side of the bar. And you may also sometimes notice some wear and tear here. It may not be completely round. And very importantly is the bar may not be straight. Another question that I often get, and again it's about chainsaws, is how low should I file the rakers or depth gauges on my chain? Well, most of the information out there that I've come across and other guys that have even been doing this longer than me is to keep the rakers or the depth gauges at 0.020 thousandths of an inch lower than the cutter on the chain. And I've got a piece of chain here to show you now. This is what I'm talking about. The rakers or depth gauges, you want these to be 20 thousandths of an inch lower than the cutter. Now I've got a feeler gauge in my hand here just to show you the thickness of what that would be. It's actually quite thin. Now if you're a seasoned cutter, you won't need any gauges or tools to know. You're just going to be doing it by instinct. But for some of you guys out there, you might want to get a tool like this that you just put over the chain when it's on your bar, and then you can manage to see how low you should file it down, this part here. Now I do have a video on how to sharpen chains by hand. I've got the link in the top right hand corner in the info button of the video right now. If you click that, I've also put the link under the video as well, so you can go watch it in full. Now what's going to happen if you don't file down the rakers when you sharpen your chain is that it won't be cutting as good because it's not going to allow the teeth to bite into the wood as much. However, if you file down the rakers too much, they're going to bite too much in the wood and it might cause your chainsaw to bog down. And here's a prime example of that on this chainsaw. They filed down the rakers or the depth gauges almost down to the bottom. So you're like at about 1/8 below or filed down more than they should be. This chainsaw will definitely bog. It's just biting into the wood way too much. And if you're going to do that with a smaller saw, be careful because they won't have the power to keep up. Maybe you can get away with it with a bigger saw like that 70 cc's or more, but with smaller saws, just forget about it. It's just way too hard on it. Now, everybody does things differently. It doesn't mean it's wrong. We'd like to hear how you file down the rakers or the depth gauges on your chainsaw chain. Please comment below. Now, one very important thing here is if you're buying a new bar and chain for your saw, make sure you buy a matching set. And what I mean by that is if your bar's groove is 0.050 gauge, like on most Stihl chainsaws, make sure you buy a chain where the drive links are 0.050 gauge as well. Now, on most Husqvarna chainsaws, the groove is 0.058 gauge in width. So you don't want to put a chain in there that is 0.050 gauge width, because what's going to happen, that chain will be very loose in the bar. And if you buy a chain that's 0.058 gauge and try to put it in a 0.050 gauge, it won't fit. And you can usually find all that information on this part of your bar right here. For example, this bar is 0.058 gauge, meaning the groove inside, and it's a 0.325 pitch, and the chain is 72 drive links. Now, here's a quick question for you guys while we're talking about chainsaw chains. Do you prefer steel chains or Oregon chain? And if so, why? It's a tough one for me because I am an Oregon dealer. I do sell Oregon chains. However, everybody's taste is different, but I'm just curious as to why you prefer one over the other. Now, my last question for today is, what do you mix your oil fuel mixture for 2-cycle equipment? Well, first of all, I use the Steel 2-cycle oil. It's made by Castrol, and I mix my fuel and oil for 2-cycle equipment at 45-1. I don't like going 50-1. It's a little too thin in my opinion. If you go heavier, 40-1, it's a bit heavy on oil, so I find a happy medium is 45-1. And I've never blown up a 2-cycle engine using that oil fuel mix. You might want to check your screen, your spark arrestor on your muffler maybe a little bit more often, but if you use your equipment properly with good fuel without ethanol, you shouldn't have any problems at 45-1, and your equipment's going to last a lot longer. So again, the key here, guys, is to use good premium fuel and good 2-cycle engine oil. So thanks again for watching, guys. Make sure to click the bell below to get notifications when I upload new videos. Make sure you're following me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and have a great weekend.